I was about to announce my inheritance of $41 million when I overheard my son's shocking plan. "Hello, my name is Sebastian Brooks. I'm 65 years old, and I live in Asheville, North Carolina. For most of my adult life, I've been known as the caretaker of Pinecrest Estate, a sprawling property owned by the Caldwell family, where I've worked as groundskeeper and estate manager for nearly 4 decades. What no one knew, not even my own family, was that Eleanor Caldwell, the aging matriarch who passed away 3 months ago, had been harboring a secret that would change everything. The day I learned about the inheritance was unseasonably warm for October in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The morning fog had lifted, revealing the spectacular autumn colors that make Asheville famous. I was in the garden behind the main house, my arthritic hands pulling weeds from Eleanor's prized rose beds, when her attorney, Martin Weiss, approached me. "Sebastian," he said, his voice carrying that formal tone lawyers often use when delivering significant news. "I need to speak with you privately about Mrs. Caldwell's final wishes." I followed him into Eleanor's study, a room I'd only entered to dust and maintain over the years. The walls were lined with leather-bound books that no one had opened in decades. A portrait of Eleanor and her late husband hung over the stone fireplace. Martin sat behind Eleanor's mahogany desk, removed his glasses, and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I don't quite know how to tell you this, Sebastian, so I'll just say it plainly. Eleanor has left you the entirety of her estate, including Pinecrest, her investment portfolio, and liquid assets. After taxes, it comes to approximately $41 million. The room seemed to tilt. I reached for the back of a chair to steady myself. "That's impossible," I whispered. "There must be some mistake." "No mistake." Martin slid a sealed envelope across the desk. "She left this for you as well. Her instructions were to give it to you after the reading of the will." My hands trembled as I opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. "My dear Sebastian, if you're reading this, I've finally found my courage, though too late for us both. What I couldn't say in life, perhaps I can make right in death. The truth is one I've carried alone for too long. You are not just my faithful caretaker, but my son. Your mother worked as my lady's maid when we were both young women. When she fell ill after your birth, she asked me to raise you, but my husband forbade it. The compromise was keeping you close, hiring you when you came of age, watching you grow from afar. The wealth I leave you is your birthright, though I know it cannot make up for a mother's absence. Forgive me, if you can. Eleanor." The letter slipped from my fingers to the floor. Memories rushed back. Eleanor's kindness over the years, her insistence on paying for my education, the way her eyes followed me at family gatherings where I was meant to be invisible. How could I have never seen the truth? "Sebastian." Martin's voice broke through my thoughts. "Are you all right? When will this become public?" I asked, suddenly thinking of my son Daniel, his wife Rebecca, and my grandchildren. "The will reading is scheduled for tomorrow at 10. All interested parties have been notified." By interested parties, he meant the Caldwell nieces and nephews who had spent years cultivating Eleanor's favor, anticipating the windfall that would never come. And now there would be questions. Why would Eleanor leave everything to the hired help unless there was more to the story? I drove home in a daze, the mountains that had always brought me comfort now seeming like silent witnesses to a lifetime of secrets. My modest ranch house on the edge of town felt suddenly temporary, as if it had only been a way station on a journey I hadn't known I was taking. Daniel's car was in the driveway, which was unusual for a Wednesday afternoon. My son was a financial advisor at one of Asheville's most prestigious firms, and rarely left the office before 6. His unexpected presence sent a ripple of unease through me. I found him in the kitchen with Rebecca, their heads bent together in conversation that stopped abruptly when I entered. Daniel's face broke into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Dad, we were just talking about you." He approached for a hug that felt rehearsed. "Rebecca made your favorite, pot roast. We thought we'd surprise you with dinner." Rebecca turned from the stove, her smile tight. "Sebastian, perfect timing. I was just about to set the table." Something was off. In 20 years of marriage, Rebecca had never once prepared a meal in my home without it being a holiday or planned event. And Daniel, with his pressed shirt and carefully casual demeanor, seemed to be playing a role rather than being my son. "What's the occasion?" I asked, setting my keys on the counter. Can't a son have dinner with his father without an ulterior motive? Daniel laughed, but there was an edge to it. We ate dinner with forced conversation. Daniel asked about work at the estate, and I gave vague answers, unsure of how much I should reveal about my day. I noticed how his questions circled around Eleanor's death and the future of Pinecrest. Each time he mentioned her name, Rebecca would glance at him with a warning in her eyes. After dinner, I excused myself to the back porch with the excuse of needing fresh air. Through the kitchen window, I could see Daniel and Rebecca in heated whispered conversation. I couldn't make out the words, but their body language spoke volumes: urgency, frustration, calculation. I stepped further into the shadows of the porch when Daniel walked out and pulled his cell phone from his pocket. "It's me," he said to whoever was on the line. "No, he doesn't suspect anything." "Yes, I'm sure. The reading is tomorrow at 10. If what Henderson told us is true, we need to move quickly before he realizes what he's sitting on. No, I don't think he'd just hand it over. Listen, 41 million is more than enough motivation for what we're planning. We'll discuss the details tonight." My blood ran cold. Henderson was Martin Weiss's paralegal. Somehow, Daniel had learned about my inheritance before I could tell him, and whatever he was planning didn't sound like a celebration for his father's good fortune. I silently moved back into the house through the side door and made my way to my bedroom, mind racing. My own son was plotting something that involved my unexpected wealth. The warmth of family dinner had been a performance, a way to keep me unsuspecting until whatever plan they had was set in motion. I sat on the edge of my bed, the weight of 2 life-changing discoveries pressing down on me. In the span of a single day, I'd learned that I was the secret son of a wealthy woman who'd watched me from a distance all my life, and that my own son might be planning to take advantage of my newfound fortune. The inheritance that should have answered questions had only created new ones. Who could I trust? What was Daniel planning? And what would happen at tomorrow's will reading when the Caldwells, my relatives, though they didn't know it, learned that their inheritance had gone to the gardener? Sleep evaded me that night. I lay awake listening to the sounds of the house settling, thinking about the letter from Eleanor tucked inside my jacket pocket. All those years working the grounds, tending her gardens, and maintaining her home, I had been caring for my birthright without knowing it. And now, as the secret son finally recognized, I would face not only the resentment of the Caldwell family, but possibly the betrayal of my own son. Dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I watched the sunrise with a strange certainty that by the time the sun set again, nothing in my life would be the same. With $41 million and a painful web of secrets, I was about to become either the master of my destiny or the victim of others' greed. Little did I know, the will reading would be just the beginning of a nightmare I never could have imagined. Before I continue, if this story has touched you so far, please hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps me share more stories like this. That night, before the will reading, I found myself standing in front of Eleanor Caldwell's portrait in my small living room, the only thing of hers I had kept over the years. It was a modest watercolor painting she'd insisted I take after I admired it once. Looking at her face, I searched for resemblances I'd never thought to look for before. The shape of our eyes, the strong jawline. How had I never seen it? The morning of the will reading arrived with a heaviness in the air that matched my spirits. I dressed carefully in my one good suit, worn thin at the elbows but still respectable. As I knotted my tie with fingers that wouldn't stop trembling, I caught sight of Daniel's reflection in my bedroom mirror. He stood in the doorway watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. "Need help with that, Dad?" he asked, stepping forward. "I've been tying my own ties since before you were born," I replied, more sharply than I intended. The conversation I'd overheard still rang in my ears. He raised his hands in mock surrender. "Just trying to help. You seem nervous. Wouldn't you be? The Caldwells aren't going to take this well." Daniel nodded, his face a mask of sympathy that didn't reach his eyes. "I've been thinking about that. What exactly did Mrs. Caldwell leave you?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to confront him about what I'd overheard, but another part, the part that had raised him alone after his mother left us when he was just 7, couldn't believe my son would betray me. "We'll find out today," I said evasively. "I could come with you," he offered, "for moral support." "No," I said quickly. "This is something I need to face alone." The law offices of Weiss and Associates occupied the top floor of one of Asheville's few high-rise buildings. When I arrived, the conference room was already filled with the Caldwell family, Eleanor's 3 nephews and 2 nieces, all draped in expensive dark clothing, their faces set in expressions of appropriate grief mixed with barely concealed anticipation. Charles Caldwell, the eldest nephew and the family's self-appointed patriarch since Eleanor's husband died, looked up as I entered. "Sebastian, why are you here?" His tone suggested I had wandered into the wrong room. "Mr. Weiss asked me to attend," I said simply, taking a seat at the far end of the table. Charles exchanged glances with his brother Richard. "I suppose there might be some provision for the staff," he conceded, as if granting me a great favor by acknowledging my presence. Martin Weiss entered with his paralegal, Henderson, I presumed, who distributed sealed envelopes to everyone present. "Before we begin the formal reading," Martin said, "Mrs. Caldwell left specific instructions about how this meeting should proceed." He opened a leather portfolio and removed a letter. "This is in Eleanor's own hand, written 6 months ago. My dear family, I have lived a life of privilege, but also of secrets. Today those secrets end. The man you know as Sebastian Brooks, who has faithfully tended our family estate for decades, is my biological son." The room erupted in gasps and exclamations. Charles jumped to his feet, his face flushing crimson. "This is preposterous. Some sort of sick joke." Martin continued reading as if there had been no interruption. "His parentage can be confirmed by DNA testing if you wish, though I hope you will respect my word. Sebastian himself has only just learned the truth upon my passing. I failed him as a mother in life. I will not fail him in death. Therefore, I leave to Sebastian Brooks the entirety of my estate, including Pinecrest, all financial assets, and personal belongings." The chaos that followed was exactly what I had expected. Charles shouted about contesting the will. His sister Catherine wept dramatically. Richard stared at me with naked hatred. Only the youngest niece, Elizabeth, remained silent, studying me with curious eyes that seemed to be looking for family resemblances. "This is legally airtight," Martin assured them over the din. "Mrs. Caldwell has provided extensive documentation, including birth records and personal correspondence that substantiate Sebastian's identity." "We'll see about that," Charles snarled, snatching up his envelope and storming out. The others followed, leaving only Elizabeth, who approached me slowly. "You have her eyes," she said quietly. "I always wondered why she favored you." She extended her hand. "Welcome to the family, Uncle Sebastian, for whatever that's worth now." Her kindness nearly undid me. I shook her hand, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. After they had all gone, Martin explained the practicalities, the transfer of property deeds, access to accounts, the taxes that would need to be paid. "The estate is yours as of today," he concluded, "though I expect the legal challenges will begin by tomorrow." "Thank you, Martin," I said, feeling the weight of my new reality settling on my shoulders. "There's something else you should know. I believe someone in your office may have leaked information about the will before today." His expression darkened. "That's a serious accusation. My son knew about the inheritance before I told him." He mentioned the exact amount and the name Henderson. Martin's gaze flicked to the door where his paralegal had exited. "I'll look into it immediately. In the meantime, Sebastian, be careful. Sudden wealth can change how people see you, even those closest to you." I left the office feeling strangely hollow. The validation of my parentage should have been momentous, but instead I felt like a target had been painted on my back. The October sun seemed too bright as I stepped onto the sidewalk, momentarily blinding me. When my vision cleared, I saw Daniel leaning against my car. "How did it go?" he asked casually, as if he had just happened to be passing by. "About as well as could be expected," I replied, studying his face for any sign that my son, the boy I had raised to value honesty and integrity, was plotting against me. "The Caldwells aren't happy. I can imagine." He fell into step beside me as we walked to the car. "So, what happens now? Now I go home and figure out what to do with the rest of my life." "You mean what to do with $41 million, Daniel said, his voice light but his eyes sharp. I stopped walking. "How did you know that amount, Daniel? I never told you." His smile faltered for just a moment. "You must have mentioned it last night." "No," I said firmly. "I didn't." He recovered quickly, laughing and slapping me on the shoulder. "Then Rebecca and I must have amazing powers of prediction, because we were just talking about what you might do with your windfall. Come on, Dad. Let me buy you lunch to celebrate. The old man's a millionaire." I let him guide me to a nearby restaurant, maintaining the pretense that everything was normal while my mind raced. Over sandwiches and coffee, Daniel laid out what seemed like innocent suggestions for the money. Investment opportunities, a new home, travel plans, but I caught the calculating look in his eyes. He wasn't discussing dreams, he was assessing assets. "And of course, Rebecca and I would love to help you manage it all," he concluded smoothly. "It's a lot for one person to handle, especially at your age." "At my age," I repeated, feeling a flicker of anger. "I'm 65, not 95. I've managed Pinecrest Estate for decades. As an employee, Dad. Being an owner is different. There are tax implications, estate planning concerns, things my firm specializes in. I forced a smile. Let me take some time to process all this before making any decisions. His answering smile was tight. Of course. Just don't wait too long. The vultures will be circling soon enough. The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me. When I returned home, the house felt different, less like a sanctuary and more like a stage set where I was expected to play a role. I changed out of my suit and went to the backyard, seeking comfort in the small garden I'd cultivated over the years. My hands found the soil automatically, pulling weeds and turning earth, the familiar motions calming my racing thoughts. The sound of car doors slamming in my driveway pulled me back to reality. Voices approached, Daniel's, Rebecca's, and others I didn't recognize. I stayed hidden behind the tall rosemary bushes, listening. "This is the property," Daniel was saying. "Modest, as you can see. He's lived here for 30 years. And the new property?" a woman's voice asked. "Pinecrest Estate. Over 20 acres. The main house is nearly 10,000 square feet. Built in 1891. Fully restored in 2005. It's a gold mine, especially in this market. And your father intends to sell?" A man's voice this time, brisk and professional. "He will," Rebecca interjected. "He just doesn't know it yet. He's in over his head with this inheritance. Sebastian's a gardener, for God's sake. He clips hedges and plants flowers. He has no idea how to manage that kind of wealth. Or that kind of property," Daniel added. "We're helping him see reason. The estate should be sold, the assets liquidated and properly invested. With the right management. With your firm's management," the woman cut in shrewdly. Daniel laughed. "Of course. Family takes care of family." I felt sick listening to them. They were already carving up my inheritance like vultures on a carcass, and I hadn't even moved into Pinecrest yet. The wealth I'd just received, wealth that represented my birthright and Eleanor's final acknowledgment of our connection, was nothing more to them than a financial opportunity. They moved toward the house, and I stayed in the garden until I heard them leave. When I finally went inside, I found a business card on my kitchen counter. "Alexis Morgan, Premier Real Estate. Daniel asked me to leave this for you. Looking forward to discussing Pinecrest Estate." I crumpled the card and threw it in the trash. Then I picked up the phone and called the one person who had shown me kindness that day. "Elizabeth Caldwell. It's Sebastian. I'm sorry to bother you, but I need someone to talk to who understands this situation. Someone I can trust." Her voice softened. "I've been expecting your call, actually. Why don't you come over for dinner tonight? I think we have a lot to discuss." Elizabeth lived in a tasteful townhouse in downtown Asheville. Unlike the other Caldwells, she had pursued a career in art restoration rather than living off family money. Her home reflected her independent spirit, warm, creative, and free of the ostentation that characterized Charles's mansion or Richard's penthouse. Over a simple meal of roasted chicken and vegetables, I told her everything: the overheard phone call, the real estate agent, Daniel and Rebecca's plans. She listened without interruption, her expression growing more troubled with each revelation. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You need to protect yourself, Sebastian. If what you suspect is true, this isn't just about them taking advantage of you financially. There's something more sinister at play." "He's my son," I said helplessly. "I raised him to be better than this. People change when there's money involved. 41 million is enough to corrupt even the strongest moral compass." She hesitated. "There's something else you should know. Charles and Richard have already consulted with a lawyer about contesting the will. They're planning to claim Eleanor wasn't of sound mind when she made you her heir. That doesn't surprise me. What might surprise you is that they approached Daniel last week, before the will reading. Their lawyer contacted several people connected to Eleanor, including your son." My blood ran cold. "How do you know this?" "I overheard Charles talking about it. They're building an alliance against you, Sebastian. The family outsider who suddenly became heir to the Caldwell fortune. They'll use everything they can, your background, your job, your age, to try to prove you manipulated Eleanor. But that's absurd. I didn't even know she was my mother until after she died. Truth is rarely the deciding factor in family disputes over money." Elizabeth's voice was gentle but firm. "You need to be prepared for what's coming, and you need to be very careful around Daniel until you understand exactly what he's planning." I left Elizabeth's feeling both strengthened by her alliance and deeply troubled by her warnings. The drive home took me past Pinecrest Estate, and on impulse I turned in at the gates. The security guard, now my employee, I realized with a jolt, nodded respectfully as I passed. The main house was dark except for the security lights. I parked and walked the grounds in the moonlight, touching the trees I had pruned, passing the flower beds I had planted. This place that had been my workplace for decades was now my home, if I chose to claim it. But at what cost? My phone rang, startling me. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. "Dad, where are you?" "I stopped by the house, but you're not there." "I went for a drive," I said, deliberately vague. "Needed to clear my head." "Well, I have good news. I've set up a meeting tomorrow with my firm's senior partners. They're prepared to offer you a comprehensive wealth management package, and Alexis Morgan can meet us at Pinecrest to begin the assessment for listing." "I haven't decided to sell, Daniel." His silence spoke volumes. When he finally responded, his voice had an edge I'd never heard before. "Don't be ridiculous, Dad. What are you going to do with a 20-acre estate? Play lord of the manor? That's not you. You need to be practical about this." "What I need," I said carefully, "is time to consider all my options. Time is a luxury you don't have. The Caldwells are already mounting a legal challenge. If you don't act quickly—" "I'll handle the Caldwells," I interrupted, "and I'll make my own decisions about Pinecrest and the money." "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice cold. "A costly one." The line went dead, and I stood in the moonlit garden of my inheritance, feeling more alone than I had in years. My son had just shown me his true face, and it was the face of a stranger. As I walked back to my car, I noticed a light on in the caretaker's cottage, the small house on the edge of the property where I had lived during the early years of my employment at Pinecrest. Curious, I approached quietly and peered through the window. Inside, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with a man I didn't recognize. Papers were spread between them, and they were deep in conversation. I couldn't hear their words, but the intensity of their discussion was clear. Daniel pointed at something on one of the documents, and the man nodded, making notes. I backed away silently, my heart pounding. Whatever Daniel was planning, it was already in motion, and I had a sinking feeling that I was running out of time to stop it. "Where are you listening from?" That night, I returned to my modest ranch house with my mind racing and my heart heavy. The moonlight cast long shadows across my living room floor as I sat in darkness, contemplating how quickly life can change. Just 3 days ago, I was simply Sebastian Brooks, the caretaker of Pinecrest Estate. Now I was a man of wealth, a newly discovered heir, and apparently the target of my own son's schemes. I couldn't sleep. The betrayal cut too deep, leaving a wound that throbbed with each heartbeat. I'd raised Daniel alone after his mother abandoned us, working extra hours at Pinecrest to give him everything he needed. Music lessons, private school, college without debt. I'd gone without so he could have more. And now, at the first scent of wealth, he was circling me like a predator. Dawn broke with a gentle rain tapping against my windows. I made coffee and watched the neighborhood come to life. Mrs. Calloway collecting her newspaper, the Johnston kids waiting for the school bus under bright umbrellas. Normal lives untouched by sudden fortune or filial betrayal. For a moment, I envied them their simplicity. My phone rang. Elizabeth Caldwell. Sebastian, I hope I didn't wake you. No, I assured her. I've been up for hours. I've been thinking about your situation, she said, her voice low and urgent. You need to protect yourself, and quickly. I have some information that might help, but I don't want to discuss it over the phone. Can you meet me at my gallery in an hour? Elizabeth's art gallery was a converted warehouse in Asheville's River Arts District. When I arrived, she was turning the closed sign to open, her dark hair pulled back in a simple bun. She looked nothing like Eleanor, taking after her father's side with high cheekbones and olive skin. Yet there was something in her directness that reminded me of my newly discovered mother. She locked the door behind me. I don't open for another hour. We should be private. She led me to a back office cluttered with art catalogues and restoration supplies. On her desk lay a thick folder. I did some digging, she said, opening the folder to reveal documents, photographs, and what appeared to be financial statements. After our conversation, I couldn't shake the feeling that there's more to Daniel's plan than just helping you manage your inheritance. What did you find? I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. Daniel's financial advisory firm, Meridian Wealth, has been under SEC investigation for the past 6 months. She pointed to a printed news article with sections highlighted. They're suspected of running a sophisticated Ponzi scheme that's affected at least 20 high-net-worth clients. Nothing has been proven yet, but they're hemorrhaging clients. I stared at the article, seeing my son's company name in black and white alongside words like fraud and investigation. That can't be right, I said weakly. Daniel would never be involved in something like that. Elizabeth's eyes softened with sympathy. There's more. 2 weeks ago, Daniel took out a second mortgage on his house, and the week before that, he liquidated his retirement accounts. He's either in financial trouble or he's hiding assets. How do you know this? The Caldwell family has connections in this town, Sebastian, and unlike Charles and Richard, I actually use them for something other than social climbing. She hesitated. There's something else you should see. She slid a photograph across the desk. It showed Daniel leaving a restaurant with a man in an expensive suit. That was taken yesterday. The man with Daniel is James Harrington, Charles's attorney, the same attorney who's preparing to contest Eleanor's will. The pieces began to fall into place with sickening clarity. They're working together, I murmured. Daniel and the Caldwells. Elizabeth nodded grimly. I think Daniel struck a deal. He helps them invalidate the will. They make sure he gets a percentage of the estate once it's redistributed. It explains why he's pushing you to sell Pinecrest and liquidate assets so quickly. He wants to get his hands on as much cash as possible before any legal challenges gain traction. I sank into a chair, feeling the weight of this betrayal crushing me. My own son. I'm sorry, Sebastian. Truly. She placed a hand on my shoulder. But now that you know what you're facing, you can protect yourself. How? If my own son is conspiring against me, who can I trust? You can trust me, she said firmly, and we need to get you proper legal representation, someone not connected to the Caldwell family or to Asheville's old money network. Why are you helping me? I asked suddenly. The will cuts you out too. You could be joining your cousins in contesting it. Elizabeth was quiet for a moment. Eleanor was more than just a wealthy relative to me. When my parents died in a car accident when I was 12, she took me in while Charles and the others fought over who would be burdened with raising me. She protected me then. Maybe this is my way of honoring that. Her sincerity was impossible to doubt. For the first time since learning of my inheritance, I felt I had a true ally. What do we do first? I asked. We need to find out exactly what Daniel is planning. Knowledge is power, Sebastian. And right now, he thinks you're in the dark. You're suggesting I spy on my own son? I'm suggesting you protect yourself from someone who's already betrayed you. Her voice was gentle but firm. This isn't just about money. If Daniel is involved in financial fraud and sees you as his way out, he could try to get you to sign documents or make transfers that implicate you in his schemes. The thought sent a chill through me. I need to get into that caretaker's cottage, I decided. I saw Daniel there last night with someone, reviewing documents. I can help with that, Elizabeth said. I still have keys to most of the Pinecrest outbuildings. Eleanor gave them to me years ago when I helped catalogue the art collection. We formulated a plan. Elizabeth would create a diversion, inviting Daniel to meet her under the pretense of discussing a compromise regarding the will. Meanwhile, I would search the caretaker's cottage for evidence of whatever he was planning. As I left the gallery, my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Meeting set with financial team at 2 p.m. today. Also, realtor ready to tour Pinecrest tomorrow. Need you to sign preliminary paperwork. I texted back. Can't make it today. Maybe tomorrow. His response was immediate. This is time-sensitive, Dad. The Caldwells are moving fast. So am I muttered to myself, pocketing my phone. I spent the afternoon at Pinecrest, officially moving into the main house. The staff, my staff now, were polite but clearly confused by the sudden change in my status. Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper who had worked alongside me for 15 years, tried to serve me tea in the formal sitting room. "Mrs. Winters, please," I said, embarrassed. "I'm still me. I'd rather have coffee in the kitchen, like always." She smiled, relieved. "Thank goodness. I wasn't sure how to act with you now being." She gestured vaguely at our grand surroundings. "The owner," I supplied. "I'm not entirely sure either, but I'd like us to figure it out together." By evening, I had settled into Eleanor's study, the room where I'd first learned of my inheritance. I found myself drawn to the family photographs on her desk, images of Eleanor in her youth, standing beside a stern-looking man I assumed was her husband, my biological father. I searched the aristocratic face for traces of myself, but found none. Had she loved him? Had he known about me? Questions that would never have answers now. My phone rang. Elizabeth. It's set, she said without preamble. I'm meeting Daniel for drinks at 8:30 at the Grove Park Inn. I told him I might be able to convince Charles to drop the will contest in exchange for a settlement. He seemed very interested. I'll be at the cottage by 8:45, I confirmed. Thank you for doing this, Elizabeth. Just be careful, she warned. And Sebastian, whatever you find, remember that people do desperate things when they're backed into a corner. Daniel may be acting terribly, but try to understand why. I appreciated her attempt at compassion, but my heart had hardened. Understanding motives wouldn't change the fact of betrayal. At 8:40, I parked at the far end of the Pinecrest property and walked through the darkness toward the caretaker's cottage. The small stone building had been my home during my first decade working at the estate. I knew its every creak and corner. Elizabeth had left the key under a flower pot by the door, as promised. Inside, the cottage was dark and quiet. I used the flashlight on my phone to navigate to the small kitchen where I'd seen Daniel and the unknown man through the window. The kitchen table was empty. I searched drawers and cabinets, finding nothing unusual until I checked behind the refrigerator, an old hiding place I'd used years ago for Christmas presents when Daniel was small. Wedged in the gap was a manila envelope. Inside, I found what appeared to be legal documents, powers of attorney, financial authorizations, property transfer agreements, all with signature lines blank, waiting for my name. Also included was a proposed agreement between Daniel, Charles, and Richard Caldwell outlining a plan to contest Eleanor's will based on claims that I had exerted undue influence over her in her final years. According to the document, if they succeeded, the estate would be divided among the Caldwell heirs, with 20% going to Daniel as payment for providing evidence against me. The nature of this evidence wasn't specified, but the implication was clear. My son was prepared to lie about me to invalidate my inheritance. I photographed each document with my phone, hands shaking with anger and grief. As I was returning the envelope to its hiding place, I heard a car approaching. Headlights swept across the cottage windows. I quickly turned off my flashlight and moved to peek through the curtains. Daniel's car was pulling up to the cottage. He was alone, which meant Elizabeth's diversion had ended earlier than planned. I had seconds to decide: confront him now with the evidence of his betrayal, or hide and preserve the advantage of knowing his plans without his knowledge. The decision was made for me as the front door opened. I ducked into the bedroom closet just as Daniel entered, flipping on lights as he moved through the cottage. Through the slats in the closet door, I watched my son move with purpose to the kitchen. He retrieved the envelope from behind the refrigerator, spread the documents on the table, and made a phone call. "It's me," he said. "No, she didn't agree to a settlement." "Yes, I have all the paperwork ready." "No, he hasn't signed anything yet, but he will. He has no idea what's coming." There was a pause as Daniel listened to whoever was on the other end of the call. "Listen," he continued, his voice dropping to a tense whisper. "We need to accelerate the timeline. Dad's not as pliable as we thought. And there's something else. He's been talking to Elizabeth Caldwell." "Yes, that's a problem." "No, I don't think we need to take it that far, but we do need to act quickly." Another pause. Daniel's expression hardened. "If that's what it takes, then yes. I'm all in. But remember, once this is done, I'm out. Clean slate, fresh start, no looking back." He ended the call and gathered up the documents, returning them to the envelope. Instead of placing it back behind the refrigerator, He tucked it inside his jacket. He then did something that sent a chill through me. He went to a kitchen drawer, removed a pair of latex gloves, and put them on before taking out a small vial and eyedropper from his pocket. With methodical precision, Daniel added drops from the vial to a bottle of bourbon sitting on the counter, the same brand I'd always kept in the cottage when I lived there, the brand I still drank at home. "Sorry, Dad," he murmured as he worked, "but 41 million is just too much to leave on the table." I fought the urge to burst from the closet and confront him. What was in that vial? Poison? Something to make me ill or confused, or something that would build up in my system over time, making my death look natural, the stress of inheritance and family conflict finally taking its toll on an old man's heart. Daniel returned the doctored bourbon to the counter, removed the gloves, and did one final scan of the cottage before turning off the lights and leaving. I waited in the darkness, listening to his car drive away, trying to control my breathing and the roaring in my ears. My son had just attempted to poison me. Whatever his financial troubles, whatever pressure he was under, he had crossed a line from which there was no return. When I was certain he was gone, I emerged from the closet and took the bottle of bourbon, careful not to touch it with my bare hands. I needed to have it analyzed. But more importantly, I needed to get somewhere safe. I left the cottage the way I'd found it, locking the door and returning the key to its hiding place. In my car, I pulled out my phone with hands that wouldn't stop shaking and called Elizabeth. "Sebastian, are you all right?" Daniel left suddenly, said he had an urgent call. "I need to see you," I said, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. "Not at your place. Somewhere public." "What happened?" Alarm colored her voice. "I'll tell you when I see you. Meet me at the Starbucks on Merrimon Avenue in 20 minutes. I ended the call and sat in my car, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. The son I had raised, the boy I had loved and sacrificed for, had just tried to poison me. For money. My money. Money I hadn't even wanted until 3 days ago. As I started the car, a wave of dizziness washed over me. For a terrifying moment, I wondered if Daniel had somehow already poisoned me, perhaps something in my coffee this morning or yesterday's dinner. But the sensation passed, leaving only the sick feeling of betrayal in its wake. The autumn rain had returned, a cold drizzle that matched my mood as I drove toward town. In the span of a week, I had gained a fortune and lost a son, and I had the sinking feeling that this nightmare was only beginning. In the rearview mirror, I noticed headlights following me, keeping pace through each turn. Paranoia or genuine danger? After what I'd just witnessed, I couldn't take chances. I made a sudden turn onto a side street, then another, watching as the headlights mirrored my movements. Someone was following me, and I had a terrible feeling I knew who had sent them. The rain intensified as I navigated the winding mountain roads leading into downtown Asheville. The headlights behind me remained constant, sometimes falling back, then surging forward again, but never disappearing completely. My heart hammered against my ribs with each curve in the road, my hands slick with sweat on the steering wheel. I was being hunted. The realization settled over me like a shroud. In the span of 3 days, I had transformed from an invisible gardener to a man worth pursuing, worth poisoning, worth killing. All because of money I hadn't even wanted. Money that now threatened to cost me everything. The bottle of bourbon, evidence of my son's darkest intentions, sat secured in a plastic bag on the passenger seat. I glanced at it as lightning split the sky, illuminating the amber liquid that might have been my last drink. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife could reach. Daniel, my only child, The boy I'd raised alone had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. I thought of all the sacrifices I'd made for him, the double shifts at Pinecrest, the second jobs during winters when garden work was scarce, the nights I'd gone hungry to ensure he never knew the taste of want. Had any of it mattered? Had he ever truly seen me as anything more than an obstacle, a stepping stone to the life he believed he deserved? The car behind me accelerated suddenly, closing the distance between us. Panic surged through me as I pressed harder on the gas pedal, taking the next turn too quickly. My tires skidded on the wet pavement, and for a terrifying moment I felt the car begin to slide toward the guardrail overlooking a steep embankment. I corrected frantically, the steering wheel fighting against my grip. When I regained control, the pursuing car had vanished. I scanned my mirrors, breathing hard, but saw only darkness and rain. Had they given up, or taken another route to intercept me ahead? I changed course, abandoning my plan to meet Elizabeth at the Starbucks. If I was being followed, I couldn't risk leading whoever it was to her. Instead, I headed for the police station. Whatever was happening, whatever conspiracy Daniel had entangled himself in, I needed protection and official documentation of what I'd discovered. As I approached a traffic light, a black SUV appeared from a side street, pulling alongside me. The passenger window lowered, and I caught a glimpse of a man I didn't recognize, middle-aged, with a hard face and eyes that assessed me coldly. He raised something in his hand. A phone? A weapon? I didn't wait to find out. The light turned green, and I floored the accelerator, shooting through the intersection and taking the first available turn. The SUV followed, gaining ground. In my panic, I missed a turn for the police station and found myself heading into a less populated area of town, warehouses and closed businesses lining the streets. My phone rang. Elizabeth. I answered on speaker. Sebastian, where are you? I've been waiting. I'm being followed. I cut in, my voice tight with fear. Someone in a black SUV. I think Daniel sent them. Oh my God! Her voice sharpened with alarm. Where are you now? Industrial District, heading east on Riverside. I was trying to get to the police station, but I missed the turn. Listen to me carefully, Elizabeth said. There's an old loading dock behind my gallery. The gate code is 4-2-9-1. Pull in there and close the gate behind you. I'll meet you in 5 minutes. The SUV was still behind me, closer now. I took a hard right onto Robert Street, then left onto Lyman, zigzagging through the River Arts District. The SUV matched my every turn, professional and relentless. I spotted the back entrance to Elizabeth's gallery, a tall metal gate leading to a small courtyard and loading dock. I slowed just enough to punch the code into the keypad, the gate rolling open agonizingly slowly. The moment the gap was wide enough, I gunned the engine and shot through, then hit the inside button to close the gate. The SUV skidded to a stop on the other side. Through my rearview mirror, I watched the driver's door open. The man who emerged was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in dark clothes that blended with the rainy night. He approached the gate, examining the keypad with clinical interest. Then he looked directly at me through the gate's metal bars, his face expressionless, and took a photo of my car with his phone before returning to the SUV and driving away. I sat in the darkness, engine off, rain drumming on the roof, trying to calm my breathing. They knew where I was. They had my license plate. But for the moment, at least, there was a barrier between us. Minutes later, headlights swept across the courtyard as another car pulled in. I tensed, reaching for the ignition, when Elizabeth emerged from the driver's seat, hurrying through the rain to my car. I unlocked the passenger door, and she slid in, rain glistening in her dark hair. "Are you hurt?" she demanded, scanning me for injuries. "No, just shaken." I gestured to the gate. He took a picture of my car before he left. "They know where I am." Elizabeth's expression hardened. "Then we need to move quickly. I have a friend with a cabin in Black Mountain. We can go there while we figure out our next steps. First, we need to get this analyzed," I said, indicating the bourbon bottle. "Daniel put something in it. I saw him do it." Her eyes widened as I recounted what I'd witnessed in the cottage, Daniel's phone conversation, and the documents outlining the conspiracy with Charles and Richard. "This goes beyond a family disagreement over inheritance," she said quietly when I finished. "They're trying to eliminate you completely." "My own son," I whispered, the pain of it washing over me anew. Elizabeth's hand covered mine, warm and steady. "I have a contact at the university chemistry department who can analyze the bourbon discreetly. But right now, we need to get somewhere safe." We transferred to her car, leaving mine hidden behind the gallery. I hunched down in the passenger seat as she drove, taking a circuitous route out of town toward Black Mountain. The mountains loomed as dark shadows against the night sky, ancient and indifferent to human troubles. "Why would Daniel do this?" I asked, more to myself than to Elizabeth. What happened to turn my son into someone capable of this? Elizabeth was quiet for a moment, navigating a particularly winding section of road. "Money changes people, Sebastian. Or rather, it reveals who they truly are. I've always provided for him," I insisted. "He's never wanted for anything." "It's not about need," she said gently. "It's about desire. Some people develop an appetite for wealth that can never be satisfied. From what you've told me about the SEC investigation into Daniel's firm, he may have already crossed ethical lines long before your inheritance came into play." I thought about the man I'd seen following me, professional, methodical, dangerous. The man in the SUV wasn't just some hired thug. He looked experienced. "Private security, maybe," Elizabeth suggested. "Or worse. Charles has connections with some unsavory people." The cabin was tucked away on a wooded hillside, accessible only by a narrow gravel road that seemed to disappear into the forest. It was small but solid, built of dark timber and stone, with a covered porch wrapping around 3 sides. Inside, it smelled of pine and wood smoke. "My friend uses it mostly during hunting season," Elizabeth explained, turning on lights and checking that the doors were secure. "We should be safe here for the night." I sank into an armchair by the cold fireplace, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had kept me going was ebbing, leaving me hollow and aching. I pulled out my phone and found a series of missed calls and texts from Daniel. "Dad, where are you? Tried calling the house. Getting worried. Call me back. Just checking in. Important papers need your signature tomorrow." The brazen normalcy of his messages after what I'd witnessed made my stomach turn. I turned off the phone and set it aside. Elizabeth built a fire and made us tea, the domestic rituals creating a bubble of temporary normalcy. We sat across from each other, the flames casting shifting shadows across her face. "We need a plan," she said finally. "If what you saw is accurate, Daniel, Charles, and Richard are conspiring to invalidate the will and potentially harm you in the process. We have evidence of the conspiracy, but not enough to take to the authorities yet. We'll know more once it's analyzed, but proving Daniel put something in it will be difficult without witnesses." She leaned forward, her expression intent. "Sebastian, I think you need to consider something difficult. To protect yourself, you may need to play along with their scheme, at least temporarily." "What do you mean?" "Let Daniel think you're going along with his plans. Sign some of the preliminary paperwork. Nothing that actually transfers assets, but enough to make him think you're complying. Meanwhile, we gather more evidence of what they're planning." The thought of pretending, of looking into my son's eyes and acting as if I didn't know he had tried to poison me, seemed impossible. "I don't think I can do that." "Then we need another approach." She tapped her fingers thoughtfully on her mug. "What if we create a situation where they reveal their plans more explicitly? Something we could record as evidence." "A trap," I said slowly. "Using me as bait." "It's risky," she acknowledged. "But if we're careful and involve the right people for protection, it could work." We stayed up late into the night, formulating a plan that felt like something from a thriller movie rather than my actual life. Elizabeth would contact a private investigator she trusted, someone not connected to the Caldwell family or Asheville's small social circle. I would return to Pinecrest and pretend to be oblivious to Daniel's schemes, while wearing recording devices to capture any incriminating conversations. "The most important thing," Elizabeth emphasized, "is that you don't eat or drink anything Daniel or Rebecca gives you. Not even water. We don't know what they might try next." I nodded, though the reality of having to protect myself from my own son still felt surreal. "Try to get some sleep," she said gently. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." But sleep eluded me. I lay on the cabin's narrow bed, listening to the rain against the windows and the occasional cry of a night bird in the forest. My thoughts circled endlessly around the same questions. When had Daniel changed? Had he always been capable of this level of betrayal? Had I simply failed to see the true nature of my own child? I thought back to his childhood, a bright, ambitious boy who'd always wanted more than our modest life could provide. He'd been 14 when he first expressed shame about my occupation, introducing me to his private school friends as a property manager rather than a gardener. At the time, I'd brushed it off as teenage embarrassment. Now I wondered if it had been the first sign of the gulf between us. Dawn arrived with clearing skies and birdsong that seemed mockingly cheerful given my circumstances. Elizabeth was already awake, making coffee in the small kitchen. "I've made contact with the investigator," she said as I joined her. "He can meet us this afternoon, and my friend at the university chemistry lab can analyze the bourbon this morning." "Thank you," I said, the words inadequate for the risks she was taking on my behalf. "Why are you doing all this for me, Elizabeth? You barely know me." She was quiet for a moment, her back to me as she poured coffee. When she turned, her expression was distant, as if seeing something beyond the cabin walls. "When I was 19, Eleanor told me a story," she began, "about a young woman in service to her family who fell pregnant out of wedlock. In those days, it was a scandal that could ruin a girl's life. Eleanor wanted to help both mother and child, but her husband forbade it. The compromise was keeping the child nearby, but never acknowledging him. She met my gaze directly. I always wondered who that child was. When Eleanor died and the will was read, it all made sense. You were that child, Sebastian, and Eleanor regretted her silence every day of her life." I felt a tightness in my chest at the glimpse into my mother's thoughts, regrets I would never be able to discuss with her. "Eleanor was more than an aunt to me," Elizabeth continued. She saved me from a childhood of being shuffled between relatives who saw me as a burden. She gave me a home, an education, a chance at a life of my own choosing. Helping you now feels like honoring her memory, and perhaps making up, in some small way, for the relationship you were denied with her. Her sincerity was impossible to doubt. In the midst of betrayal and danger, I had found an ally, perhaps even family, where I least expected it. "Now," she said, her tone shifting to the practical, "let's go over the plan again. We need to be absolutely clear on the timing and signals." As we reviewed the details, I felt a strange calm settling over me. The shock and disbelief were giving way to something harder and more determined. Daniel had made his choice. Now I would make mine, not out of vengeance, but out of a simple desire to survive and protect what was rightfully mine. By mid-morning, we were ready to leave the safety of the cabin. The world outside seemed deceptively normal, sunlight filtering through autumn leaves, the distant sound of a woodpecker, the scent of pine and damp earth. It was hard to believe that somewhere in this peaceful landscape people were plotting my demise. As we drove back toward Asheville, Elizabeth's phone rang. She answered via the car's Bluetooth. "I have preliminary results," said a male voice. "The bourbon contains a significant concentration of digitalis, specifically digoxin. It's a cardiac glycoside used to treat heart conditions, but in high doses it's lethal. Causes heart block and arrhythmias that can be fatal." I felt a chill despite the warm car. "Would it look like natural causes?" I asked. "In an older man with no history of digitalis use? Possibly, especially if the medical examiner wasn't looking for it specifically. It would likely present as sudden cardiac arrest." Elizabeth thanked him and ended the call. We drove in silence for several minutes, the implications settling between us like a physical presence. "He really meant to kill you," she finally said, her voice tight with anger. The confirmation should have shocked me, but instead I felt a strange sense of clarity. The evidence was irrefutable now. My son had crossed a line from which there was no return. "We need to take this to the police," I said. "We will," Elizabeth assured me. "But we need more than the tainted bourbon. We need evidence connecting Daniel directly to the attempt. Otherwise, it's just a bottle with poison in it." We were approaching Asheville when my phone rang. Daniel again. After a glance at Elizabeth, who nodded encouragingly, I answered. "Dad, thank God." His voice was a perfect simulation of relief. "I've been trying to reach you all night. Where are you?" "I stayed at Pinecrest," I lied smoothly. "Reception is spotty in parts of the estate." "Oh." He sounded momentarily thrown off. "Well, we still have that meeting with the financial team today. It's really important, Dad. And the realtor is ready to tour Pinecrest tomorrow morning." "I'll be there," I said, forcing a neutral tone. "What time is the meeting?" 2:00 at my office. "I'll text you the address." "I know where your office is, Daniel. I'll see you at 2. I ended the call and exchanged a look with Elizabeth. The trap was baited. Now we just had to make sure I wasn't the one caught in it. As we continued toward Asheville, the sun broke fully through the clouds, illuminating the autumn landscape in a riot of red and gold. It was the kind of day Eleanor had loved, the kind of day she would have spent walking the grounds of Pinecrest, planning spring plantings and admiring the turning leaves. I felt her absence keenly, this mother I had never really known. What would she make of all this? Her secret son fighting for his life against her own great-nephew and my son. Would she regret the fortune that had put a target on my back? Or would she, like Elizabeth, stand firm against those who sought to usurp what was rightfully mine? "I never wanted this money," I said aloud. "I was content with my life before." Elizabeth glanced at me, her expression thoughtful. "Yet here we are." "Here we are," I echoed, watching the mountains rise around us like silent witnesses to a story still unfolding. "And I intend to survive it." The autumn sun cast long shadows across Asheville's downtown as Elizabeth dropped me off a block from Daniel's office building. We had spent the morning preparing, meeting with her private investigator friend, Jason Mercer, and setting up the recording devices I would wear. A small microphone was hidden in my tie clip, connected to a transmitter tucked into my inner jacket pocket. Jason would be monitoring the feed from a van parked nearby, ready to intervene if things went wrong. "Remember," Elizabeth said, squeezing my hand before I exited her car, "don't sign anything substantial. Pretend to review documents, ask questions, seem hesitant but not suspicious. We need them to reveal more of their plan." I nodded, my heart heavy with the weight of what I was about to do. "I'll call you when it's over." "Be careful, Sebastian," she said, her eyes filled with concern. "These people have already shown they're willing to go to extraordinary lengths." The glass and steel office building that housed Meridian Wealth Management gleamed in the sunlight, a monument to prosperity and respectability. How many other clients had walked through those doors, trusting Daniel with their financial futures, unaware of the SEC investigation? How many lives had my son potentially ruined before setting his sights on his own father? The receptionist greeted me warmly when I entered the suite on the 12th floor. "Mr. Brooks, welcome. Daniel mentioned you'd be coming. He's just finishing up with another client. Can I get you anything while you wait?" "No, thank you," I replied, remembering Elizabeth's warning not to accept food or drink. I settled into a leather chair in the waiting area, taking in the tasteful artwork and awards displayed on the walls. Everything designed to project success, trustworthiness, stability. 10 minutes later, Daniel emerged from his office, escorting an elderly couple to the reception area. He was the picture of professional charm, tailored suit, confident smile, solicitous manner as he shook the gentleman's hand and promised to call with updates. Not a hint of the man I'd seen preparing poison the night before. When he turned to me, his smile widened. "Dad, you made it." He embraced me, and I forced myself to return the gesture, my skin crawling at the contact. "Come on back. The team is excited to meet you." I followed him down a hallway lined with glass-walled offices where young associates worked at sleek desks. His corner office had views of the mountains to the west and downtown Asheville to the south. 3 people waited inside, 2 men and a woman, all in expensive suits, all with the same practiced smile. "Dad, this is our senior team." Daniel began introductions. "Mark Lawson, our chief financial strategist, Sophia Chen, our estate planning specialist, and Trevor Wilson, who handles our high-net-worth portfolio management." I shook hands with each of them, noting how their eyes assessed me, not as a person, but as an asset to be managed. Or perhaps, given what I now knew, as a mark to be fleeced. "It's a pleasure to meet Eleanor Caldwell's heir," Sophia said smoothly. "Daniel has told us so much about you." "All good, I hope," I replied, matching her tone while wondering exactly what Daniel had shared about me with his colleagues. "Please, have a seat." Daniel gestured to a chair positioned between him and Mark. "We've prepared some preliminary analyses of your new situation and some recommendations for immediate steps." Mark slid a folder across the table. Mr. Brooks, first let me say congratulations on your inheritance. It's quite extraordinary. And quite unexpected, I added, opening the folder to find colourful charts and graphs breaking down Eleanor's, my assets. Pinecrest Estate was listed as the largest single asset, valued at $12.4 million. The remainder was in investment portfolios, art collections, and cash holdings. As Daniel may have mentioned, Trevor began, there are some time-sensitive considerations here. The Caldwell family is preparing to contest the will, which could tie up these assets in litigation for years. What we're proposing, Sophia continued seamlessly, is a strategic liquidation of key assets, particularly Pinecrest, before any legal challenges can freeze the estate. I noticed how they spoke in perfect coordination, a well-rehearsed pitch they'd probably delivered to countless wealthy clients. Only this time, the client was being set up for something far more sinister than merely aggressive financial management. "I'm not sure I want to sell Pinecrest," I said, watching Daniel's face carefully. "It's been my home, in a way, for most of my adult life." A flicker of annoyance crossed Daniel's features, quickly masked. "Dad, we discussed this. Pinecrest is a massive liability. Property taxes, maintenance costs, staff salaries. You'd be spending a fortune just to keep it running." "Money I now have," I pointed out. "True," Mark interjected, "but keeping it tied up in an illiquid asset like real estate limits your options. By selling Pinecrest, we could reinvest those funds in our high-yield portfolio strategies that have been consistently outperforming the market." I remembered the SEC investigation Elizabeth had mentioned and wondered how many of those high-yield strategies involved actual investments versus paying returns to earlier investors from new clients' money, the classic structure of a Ponzi scheme. "What kind of returns are we talking about?" I asked, playing along. Trevor pulled out more charts, showing impressive growth trajectories. "Our premium client portfolio has averaged 18% annual returns over the past 5 years, a number that would be nearly impossible to achieve consistently through legitimate investment strategies, especially during market downturns." But I nodded as if impressed. "That does sound promising," I said, "but I'd need time to consider a decision as significant as selling Pinecrest." "Time is exactly what we don't have," Daniel said, a harder edge entering his voice. "The realtor already has potential buyers lined up, people who could close quickly with cash. And we need to move assets before the Caldwells can get a court order freezing the estate." "I understand your concern," I said, meeting my son's gaze directly, "but this is all happening very quickly. 3 days ago, I was the caretaker. Today, I'm being asked to sell the very property I've spent decades maintaining." Daniel exchanged glances with his colleagues, a silent communication passing between them. "Could you give us a moment?" he asked them. "I'd like to speak with my father privately." The three nodded and exited the office, closing the glass door behind them. Daniel's demeanor changed instantly, the professional facade dropping away to reveal impatience and something darker. "Dad, what are you doing?" he demanded. "We need to move quickly on this." "Why the rush?" I asked, knowing the answer but needing him to say it, to incriminate himself on the recording. "The will has been validated. The estate is legally mine." Daniel leaned forward, lowering his voice. "The Caldwells have resources and connections you can't imagine. They're going to come after you with everything they have. Charles has judges and politicians in his pocket. Richard has connections with people you don't want to meet. People like the man who followed me last night?" I asked, watching his reaction carefully. A flicker of surprise crossed his face before he controlled it. "What are you talking about?" "After I left Pinecrest last night, someone in a black SUV followed me through town. Quite aggressively, actually." Daniel sat back, his expression unreadable. "The Caldwells are playing hardball, then. All the more reason to liquidate quickly and get these assets protected." "Protected in your firm's management," I noted. "Of course, in our firm. Where else would you go? Some random financial advisor who doesn't understand the situation." He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, frustration breaking through his composure. "Dad, you need to trust me on this. I'm trying to protect you." The audacity of this statement, coming from the man I'd watched prepare poison for me, nearly broke my resolve to play along. "Protect me," I repeated, letting a hint of doubt color my voice. "Yes, protect you." Daniel stood and began pacing. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. The Caldwells want you out of the picture entirely." "And you don't?" I asked quietly. He stopped pacing and stared at me. "What's that supposed to mean?" I maintained eye contact, forcing him to look away first. "Nothing. I'm just trying to understand everyone's motivations here." He resumed his seat, visibly collecting himself. "My motivation is to help my father secure a $41 million inheritance before greedy relatives can take it away. Is that so hard to believe?" "No," I lied. "But I still need time to think about selling Pinecrest." Daniel sighed dramatically. "Fine. But at least sign these preliminary agreements so we can start moving the liquid assets. The cash holdings and investment portfolios don't need to wait on your decision about the property." He slid several documents across the desk. I recognized them as similar to the ones I'd photographed in the caretaker's cottage. Powers of attorney and financial authorizations that would give Daniel control over substantial portions of the estate. "I'll need to review these carefully," I said, gathering them up. "Have my own attorney look them over." "Your own attorney?" Daniel's voice sharpened. "Since when do you have your own attorney?" "Since I inherited $41 million, I replied evenly. "It seems prudent." His eyes narrowed. "Who is it?" "Someone local." "I'm still deciding," I hedged. "But I've been getting advice from various quarters." "Like who?" The intensity of his question confirmed my suspicions. He was worried about who might be warning me about him. "Just people who have my best interests at heart," I said. Daniel studied me for a long moment, and I saw a calculation happening behind his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice had softened. "Dad, I'm worried about you. This whole situation has been a shock, and now you're acting different. Paranoid, even." "Paranoid," I echoed. "Yes. Following, suspicious of my motives." He leaned forward, concern etched on his face so convincingly that for a split second I almost doubted myself. The stress of this inheritance, the Caldwell's hostility, it's a lot for anyone to handle. Maybe you should see someone, talk through what you're experiencing. I realized with a chill what he was doing, laying groundwork to question my mental competence. If I could be declared unfit to manage my affairs, Daniel could petition for conservatorship. Combined with his power of attorney, he could control everything. "I'm feeling perfectly clear-headed," I assured him. "Just cautious. $41 million requires caution, doesn't it?" Before he could respond, his office phone rang. He answered, listened briefly, then covered the mouthpiece. "I need to take this. Why don't you look over those documents, and we can continue our conversation tomorrow? The realtor will meet us at Pinecrest at 10. I nodded, gathering the papers and standing to leave. As I reached the door, Daniel called after me, "Dad, are you staying at Pinecrest tonight?" The question seemed innocent enough, but now I understood its significance. He wanted to know where I'd be, vulnerable, alone. "Yes," I lied. "I'm getting used to the place." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Good. Try to get some rest. Big day tomorrow." I left the office, papers in hand, feeling his gaze on my back as I walked down the hallway. The receptionist smiled as I passed, and I wondered if she too was part of this, if the entire firm was built on deception. Outside, I walked a block before turning into an alley where Jason Mercer's van was parked. He opened the side door, and I climbed in to find Elizabeth and Jason huddled around monitoring equipment. "We got it all," Jason confirmed, removing my microphone. He didn't directly incriminate himself, but there's definitely enough suspicious content to warrant deeper investigation. "What about the papers?" Elizabeth asked, taking the documents I'd brought from Daniel's office. "Similar to what I photographed at the cottage," I said. "Powers of attorney, financial authorizations. And did you catch his questions about my mental state?" Elizabeth nodded grimly. "Setting you up to be declared incompetent. It's a classic play in inheritance disputes." "What's our next move?" I asked, suddenly exhausted. The strain of maintaining a facade of normalcy with Daniel had drained me completely. "We take this recording and the bourbon to the police," Jason said. "It's enough to open an investigation, especially with the digoxin evidence. And tonight—" I looked to Elizabeth, dreading the thought of returning to Pinecrest where Daniel expected to find me. "You'll stay with me," she said firmly. "My building has security. You'll be safe there." As we drove to the police station, I stared out at the streets of Asheville, the city where I'd spent my entire life, where I'd raised my son, where I'd tended gardens and lived modestly, contentedly, all transformed now into an unfamiliar landscape of threats and betrayals. At the station, we met with Detective Sarah Rodriguez, a serious woman with intelligent eyes who listened without interruption as we laid out our evidence. The poisoned bourbon, the recorded conversation, the photographs of the conspiracy documents from the caretaker's cottage. "This is quite a situation, Mr. Brooks," she said when we finished. "Attempted murder, conspiracy, financial fraud, and involving your own son." Her tone was professional, but I caught a hint of sympathy in her gaze. "Can you protect him?" Elizabeth asked. "Daniel thinks he's staying at Pinecrest tonight. If no one's there, he might realize something's wrong," Detective Rodriguez finished. "I understand. We'll send officers to keep an eye on the estate, and I'll assign a protective detail to Mr. Brooks." "What about Daniel?" I asked, my voice hollow. "Will you arrest him?" "Not yet," she replied carefully. "We need to build a stronger case, especially since we don't have direct evidence of him administering the poison. The recording helps, but it's not conclusive. We'll need to execute search warrants on his home and office, interview his associates." She paused. "Mr. Brooks, I have to ask, are you prepared for what happens next? Once we move forward with this investigation, there's no going back. Your son will likely face serious criminal charges." The question hit me like a physical blow. Was I prepared to see my only child, the baby I'd cradled, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, The young man I'd proudly watched graduate from college. Arrested? Potentially imprisoned? But then I remembered the clinical way he'd added poison to the bourbon. The calculated betrayal. The man who had followed me through the rainy night. The son I'd loved was already gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. "Yes," I said finally, "I'm prepared. Do what you need to do." We spent hours at the station, giving formal statements, signing affidavits. By the time we left, night had fallen, a chill wind blowing leaves across the empty streets. A plainclothes officer followed us to Elizabeth's downtown apartment in an unmarked car. My new shadow, my protection against my own flesh and blood. Elizabeth's apartment was like her, elegant but unpretentious, filled with art and books. She made up the guest room for me and brought me tea, hovering with concern. "You should try to sleep," she said. "Tomorrow will be difficult." But sleep, when it finally came, brought no peace. I dreamed of Eleanor Caldwell, young and beautiful, holding an infant she was forbidden to claim. I dreamed of Daniel as a child, laughing as I pushed him on a swing. I dreamed of gardens that withered and died as I tried desperately to revive them, the earth turning to dust in my hands. I woke before dawn, disoriented in the unfamiliar room. For a moment, I couldn't remember why I was there, why dread sat heavy in my chest. Then it all came rushing back. The inheritance, the betrayal, the poison, the police. My new reality. I made coffee and sat by Elizabeth's window, watching the city wake up. Delivery trucks rumbled down the streets. Early shift workers hurried to buses. Normal lives continuing while mine had shattered beyond recognition. Elizabeth joined me, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking younger somehow without her usual professional demeanor. "Any word from Detective Rodriguez?" she asked, accepting the cup of coffee I offered. "Nothing yet." I checked my phone. But Daniel texted at midnight asking if I was still planning to meet the realtor at Pinecrest this morning. "What did you say?" I didn't respond. "I'm supposed to be asleep at Pinecrest, remember?" She nodded, sipping her coffee thoughtfully. "He'll know something's wrong when you don't show up for the appointment." "I know." The thought filled me with a strange mixture of dread and relief. The charade was ending. Whatever happened next would at least be real, not this exhausting deception. My phone rang. Detective Rodriguez. "Mr. Brooks," she said without preamble, "we executed search warrants at your son's home and office early this morning. We found additional vials of digoxin in his home safe, along with documents outlining what appears to be a conspiracy with Charles and Richard Caldwell. We're bringing him in for questioning now." The news should have brought satisfaction, vindication. Instead, I felt only a profound sadness. "Thank you for letting me know. There's something else," she continued, her voice softer now. "In your son's desk at home, we found a series of letters. They appear to be from his mother, written over many years though never sent to him. They reference significant gambling debts and financial troubles. It may help explain his motivations, though it certainly doesn't excuse his actions. My ex-wife, Mary Ann, who had abandoned us when Daniel was 7, claiming she needed to find herself. She had never contacted us again, and I'd always told Daniel she simply wasn't capable of being a mother. Had she been writing to him all this time? Had he been carrying the weight of her troubles along with whatever financial crimes he'd committed at his firm? "Is there anything else I should know?" I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "Just that we're going to need you to come in later today for additional statements." "And Mr. Brooks?" You should know that your son is likely to be charged with attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. He's facing significant prison time." I thanked her and ended the call, relaying the information to Elizabeth. She watched me with concern. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. "No," I admitted. "I don't think I will be for a very long time." My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Where are you? Realtor is waiting at Pinecrest." As I stared at the message, another came through. "Dad? Is everything okay?" The facade of concern from a man who had tried to kill me. My son, my only family until a week ago, now a stranger, a criminal, a would-be murderer. I turned off the phone and set it aside, unable to bear the pretense any longer. Outside, the autumn sun broke through morning clouds, illuminating the changing leaves of the mountains surrounding Asheville. The world was achingly beautiful, indifferent to human tragedy. "What will you do now?" Elizabeth asked quietly. "About Pinecrest, the inheritance, all of it?" I hadn't thought beyond surviving, beyond exposing Daniel's plot. But her question forced me to look forward, to a future I'd never anticipated. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I never wanted to be rich. I never wanted to be anything but what I was, a gardener who took pride in his work, a father who loved his son." My voice broke on the last word. Elizabeth's hand covered mine, warm and steady. "Whatever you decide, you don't have to face it alone. Eleanor may not have been able to be your mother in life, but in death she gave you more than money. She gave you the truth about who you are. And maybe she gave you a new family too." I looked at this woman, technically my cousin, though she felt more like the sister I'd never had, and felt a glimmer of something I hadn't expected to feel again. Hope. Not for reconciliation with Daniel or for the wealth that had brought such chaos into my life, but for the possibility that from these ashes of betrayal something new and genuine might emerge. My phone rang again, an unknown number this time. I answered cautiously. "Sebastian Brooks?" a man's voice asked. "Yes. This is Officer Daniels with the Asheville Police Department. There's been an incident at your son's office building. Detective Rodriguez asked me to contact you immediately." A cold dread settled over me. "What kind of incident?" "Sir, I'm afraid your son attempted to flee when officers arrived to question him. There was an altercation, and the officer hesitated. He's been taken to Memorial Hospital with a gunshot wound. It's serious, sir. Detective Rodriguez thought you should know right away." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. Despite everything, the betrayal, the poison, the conspiracy, Daniel was still my son, the child I had raised, the last connection to my former life. "I'll be right there," I said, already reaching for my coat. Elizabeth drove me to the hospital, neither of us speaking. The same questions echoed in my mind with each passing mile. Would he survive? And if he did, could I ever forgive him? Could I ever look at him again without seeing the man who had tried to kill me for money? As we pulled into the hospital parking lot, I steeled myself for whatever came next. Daniel might live or die. He might face justice or escape it. But either way, nothing would ever be the same. The life I had known was over, shattered by inheritance and betrayal. Whatever emerged from these ruins would have to be built anew, brick by painful brick. In that moment, standing at the threshold of the hospital where my son fought for his life after trying to take mine, I understood finally what Eleanor Caldwell had sought to give me with her inheritance. Not wealth, but truth. Not comfort, but freedom. The freedom to finally know who I was, who my family was, and perhaps most importantly, who I might yet become. The autumn sun cast long shadows as I approached Daniel's office building, my heart heavy with the knowledge of betrayal. The recording device hidden beneath my tie clip felt like a physical manifestation of the distance that had grown between my son and me, a distance I never imagined possible. Elizabeth's words echoed in my mind as I entered the gleaming tower. "Be careful, Sebastian. Don't sign anything substantial." The receptionist greeted me with practiced warmth. Offering refreshments I politely declined. Through the glass walls, I watched my son escorting elderly clients, potential victims of his schemes. His smile never reached his eyes. "Dad!" Daniel embraced me with false enthusiasm. "The team is eager to meet you." I followed him into a sleek corner office where 3 impeccably dressed executives waited, their gazes assessing me not as a person but as an asset to be managed, or exploited. "We've prepared an analysis of your new situation," Daniel explained, sliding a folder across the polished table. I examined colorful charts breaking down Eleanor's, my, assets. Pinecrest Estate valued at $12.4 million. Investment portfolios. Art collections. The life I never knew was mine by birthright. "What we're proposing," the woman named Sophia said, "is a strategic liquidation of key assets, particularly Pinecrest, before any legal challenges can freeze the estate." I felt a chill despite the warm office. "I'm not sure I want to sell Pinecrest. It's been my home for most of my adult life." Annoyance flickered across Daniel's face. "Dad, we discussed this. Pinecrest is a massive liability. Taxes, maintenance, staff salaries. Money I now have," I pointed out quietly. The team continued their well-rehearsed pitch about high-yield portfolio strategies and market-beating returns, claims that now rang hollow knowing about the SEC investigation Elizabeth had revealed. "I'd need time to consider a decision as significant as selling Pinecrest," I said carefully. "Time is exactly what we don't have," Daniel replied, his voice hardening. "The Caldwells are moving to freeze the estate." He dismissed his colleagues with a glance. When the door closed behind them, his demeanor changed instantly. "Dad, what are you doing?" he demanded. "We need to move quickly." "Why the rush?" I asked, watching his face for any reaction the recording might capture. Daniel leaned forward, lowering his voice. "The Caldwells have resources you can't imagine. Charles has judges in his pocket. Richard has connections with people you don't want to meet. People like the man who followed me last night?" I asked. Surprise flickered across his face. "What are you talking about?" "After I left Pinecrest, someone in a black SUV followed me through town. Quite aggressively." Daniel recovered quickly. "The Caldwells are playing hardball. All the more reason to liquidate quickly. And place everything under your firm's management," I noted. "Of course," he snapped. "Where else would you go? Some random advisor who doesn't understand the situation." Frustration broke through his composure. "Dad, I'm trying to protect you." The audacity of this statement, coming from the man I'd watched prepare poison, nearly broke my resolve. "Protect me," I repeated, letting doubt color my voice. "Yes, protect you." Daniel began pacing. "The Caldwells want you out of the picture entirely. And you don't?" I asked quietly. He stared at me. "What's that supposed to mean?" I maintained eye contact, forcing him to look away first. "Nothing." I'm just trying to understand everyone's motivations." Daniel slid several documents across the desk, powers of attorney that would give him control over substantial portions of the estate. "I'll need to review these carefully," I said, gathering them. "Have my own attorney look them over." "Your own attorney?" His voice sharpened. "Since when do you have an attorney?" "Since I inherited $41 million, I replied evenly. "Who is it?" "Someone local." The intensity of his question confirmed my suspicions. "I've been getting advice from various quarters," I hedged. Daniel studied me, calculation happening behind his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice had softened unnaturally. "Dad, I'm worried about you. This situation has been a shock, and you're acting paranoid." I realized with a chill what he was doing, laying groundwork to question my mental competence. If declared unfit, Daniel could petition for conservatorship and control everything. "I'm feeling perfectly clear-headed," I assured him. "Just cautious." His office phone rang, offering a timely interruption. "I need to take this," he said after listening briefly. "Look over those documents, and we'll continue tomorrow. The realtor will meet us at Pinecrest at 10. As I reached the door, Daniel called after me, "Dad, are you staying at Pinecrest tonight?" The question seemed innocent but carried sinister weight. He wanted to know where I'd be, vulnerable, alone. "Yes," I lied. "I'm getting used to the place." Outside, I met Elizabeth and Jason in the surveillance van parked discreetly in an alley. "We got it all," Jason confirmed, removing my microphone. "Not direct incrimination, but definitely suspicious." "Did you catch his questions about my mental state?" I asked. Elizabeth nodded grimly. "Setting you up to be declared incompetent. Classic play in inheritance disputes." "We take this recording and the bourbon to the police," Jason said. "Enough to open an investigation." At the station, Detective Rodriguez listened intently to our evidence: the poisoned bourbon, the recorded conversation, the conspiracy documents. "This is quite a situation," she said when we finished. "Attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, and involving your own son." Her professional tone couldn't completely mask her sympathy. "What about Daniel?" I asked hollowly. "Will you arrest him?" "Not yet. We need a stronger case." She paused. "Mr. Brooks, are you prepared for what happens next? Once we move forward, there's no going back." The question hit me like a physical blow. Was I prepared to see my only child, the baby I'd cradled, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, arrested? Imprisoned? But then I remembered the clinical way he'd added poison to the bourbon. The calculated betrayal. "Yes," I said finally. "I'm prepared. Do what you need to do." The hospital corridors felt endless as I rushed toward the emergency wing, each step heavier than the last. My heart, the same heart my son had tried to stop, now thundered painfully in my chest. Despite everything Daniel had done, a father's love persisted beneath layers of betrayal and fear. Elizabeth walked beside me, her quiet strength a tether in this storm. The antiseptic smell and harsh fluorescent lighting created a surreal backdrop to my nightmare. My only son fighting for life after attempting to flee police questioning about his plot to murder me. At the nurses' station, Detective Rodriguez waited, her face grave. "Mr. Brooks, thank you for coming quickly." "How is he?" The words caught in my throat. "In surgery." The bullet struck his shoulder, but there was significant blood loss. She hesitated. Before they took him in, he asked for you. Said he needed to tell you something. A bitter smile crossed my lips. More lies, I imagine. I don't think so. Her voice softened. He seemed different, desperate, but not to escape. More like someone who's carried a weight too long. We moved to a private waiting area where 2 officers stood guard. The reality of my new existence crystallized in that moment. Police protection, family betrayal, wealth that had transformed me from invisible gardener to targeted heir overnight. Sebastian! Elizabeth's voice broke through my thoughts. I found something in the documents we took from Daniel's office. She handed me a worn envelope. It was hidden beneath financial reports. Inside was a letter dated 15 years ago, in handwriting I hadn't seen in decades. Daniel, by the time you read this, I'll have made good on my promise to disappear for good. The debts are too deep now. The people I owe aren't patient men. They've threatened you, threatened Sebastian, and I can't bear being the cause of harm to either of you. There's something you should know. The reason I left when you were 7 wasn't to find myself, as your father told you. I left because I discovered a truth that would destroy your father if he knew. Eleanor Caldwell is his mother. I found letters hidden in the attic. Correspondence between Eleanor and your grandmother. I confronted Eleanor, demanding money for my silence. She refused, saying Sebastian deserved to know the truth on her terms, not through blackmail. She threatened to tell him everything if I persisted. So I ran. I couldn't face Sebastian knowing I'd tried to exploit the secret of his birth. Over the years, my gambling debts grew. The men I owe now know about you, about Sebastian, about Eleanor's fortune. They're patient. They've waited all these years for Eleanor to die, knowing the inheritance would eventually come. They found me last year. They've been watching, waiting. When Eleanor finally passes, they expect payment. From you, through me. They know you're a financial advisor now. They expect you to help them access whatever Sebastian inherits. I'm sorry to place this burden on you. You deserved better parents than we've been. Your mother. The letter trembled in my hands. All these years, Mary Ann had known. And Daniel, how long had he known? Had he been acting under duress, forced to target me by his mother's mysterious creditors? This changes things, I whispered. Elizabeth took my hand. It explains, but doesn't excuse. Mr. Brooks. A surgeon approached, removing his mask. Your son is stable. The bullet missed major arteries, though he lost considerable blood. He's asking for you. I followed him through double doors into recovery. Daniel lay pale against white sheets, tubes and monitors surrounding him. The sight of my child, broken, wounded, cracked something inside me that wealth and betrayal hadn't touched. Dad! His voice was barely audible. You came. Of course I came. I moved closer, noting the handcuff securing his wrist to the bed rail. I need to tell you, he struggled to speak. I found your mother's letter, I said quietly. Relief washed over his face, followed by shame so profound it aged him before my eyes. Then you know why. Not that it matters. What I did. Tears filled his eyes. I had a choice. I could have come to you, told you everything. Instead, I chose the worst path. Who are they, Daniel? These men your mother owes. He shook his head weakly. The Harmon brothers. They control most illegal gambling in 3 states. They've been watching us for years, waiting for Eleanor to die. When the will was read, they gave me 1 week to liquidate enough assets to cover what Mom owes, plus interest, $8 million. The poison. My idea. Self-loathing filled his voice. They just wanted the money. I convinced myself you'd never adjust to wealth, that you'd be happier in your simple life, that I was protecting you from vultures who'd take advantage. His voice broke. Lies I told myself to justify the unforgivable. I stood silent, absorbing this final truth. My son had not been forced to plot my murder. He'd chosen it, convinced himself it was somehow justified. The Caldwells, real co-conspirators. They had their own motives, keeping the Caldwell fortune in proper hands. Our interests aligned temporarily. He closed his eyes, exhaustion claiming him. I'm so sorry, Dad. Not for getting caught. For becoming someone who could do this to you. As he drifted into sedated sleep, Detective Rodriguez appeared at my side. Did you get what you needed? I asked, knowing they'd been monitoring. Enough to pursue the Harmon brothers and the Caldwells. She studied my face. And your son? How do you want to proceed? The question weighed heavier than all of Eleanor's inheritance. Daniel had plotted my death, yet he remained my only child, the only family I'd known until a week ago. Justice, I said finally, whatever that means. I can't protect him from consequences he's earned. Outside in the corridor, Elizabeth waited, her expression a mixture of concern and understanding that required no words. We walked together in silence toward an uncertain future, one where wealth had revealed both the worst and perhaps, in Elizabeth's friendship, the best in those around me. "What will you do now?" she asked as we stepped into the crisp autumn air. I looked toward the mountains where Pinecrest stood, where Eleanor had watched me from a distance all those years, where my life as Sebastian Brooks, gardener, had ended and my life as Sebastian Brooks, heir, had begun. "Live," I answered simply. "Learn to live with all of this." The truth, like the inheritance itself, was both gift and burden. I would carry both forward, one step at a time.